The wind never rests on the Yorkshire moors. It cries and howls, tearing across the desolate earth, rattling the stones, as though even the land carries the memory of old sorrows. And there, battered by storm and silence, stands a house, Wuthering Heights. Its walls have absorbed too many secrets. Its windows have stared too long into the dark, and within them lived a love so fierce it burned like fire, yet so merciless it destroyed everything in its path. This is not a gentle tale, but one of passion that defied reason, of hate that outlived mercy, and of souls bound together even beyond death. Wuthering Heights is not just a house, it is a storm, and once you step inside, the storm never lets you go. I came to this place seeking solitude. My name is Lockwood, tenant of Thrushcross Grange, a fine house owned by Mr. Heathcliff, who lived some miles away at Wuthering Heights. One winter's afternoon, I rode up to meet my landlord. The house stood dark upon the hill. Even the thorn bushes around it seemed bent and broken by years of storm. Inside, Heathcliff received me. He was tall, dark, with an expression both noble and savage. His manner was cold, suspicious, as though he barely endured my presence. Around us, the house gave no comfort. Heavy furniture, dark walls, and restless dogs made it a place of unease. My first visit to Wuthering Heights had been strange and silent, but curiosity tugged at me. I thought perhaps I had caught its master on a sour day, and that with another attempt I might soften his reserve. So the very next afternoon I rode again across the moors, determined to win Mr. Heathcliff's goodwill. But it was a mistake I would not soon forget. The visit was worse than the first. The household seemed filled with bitterness. A young woman, pale and sorrowful, sat by the fire. She was Heathcliff's daughter-in-law, though scarcely more than a girl. Beside her sat Hareton Earnshaw, fierce and rough, his eyes filled with resentment. Not one face looked kindly upon me. When a snowstorm broke that evening, I found myself trapped at the Wuthering Heights. Reluctantly, they gave me a chamber upstairs, an old room seldom used. The chamber was strange. A great oak bed stood enclosed like a box, curtains heavy with dust. On the window ledge, I found words scratched over and over, names fading into one another. Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Linton, Catherine Heathcliff. I traced them with my fingers, wondering what grief had driven someone to carve her name so desperately. At last I lay down to sleep. The wind wailed against the glass, rattling it with fierce insistence. Half dreaming, I thought a branch tapped at the pane, restless like a visitor begging entrance. I rose to silence it, but when I reached out, it was not a branch that grasped me. It was a hand, thin, icy, desperate, closed around my wrist. My heart leapt with terror. A voice, faint and childlike, pierced through the storm, saying, "Let me in, let me in. I've wandered the moors these 20 years." I struggled, horrified, but the grip only tightened. The voice cried again, thin with sorrow, "Let me in!" With a violent effort, I wrenched myself free, shattering the glass and tearing my flesh. Blood and cold mingled as I stumbled back, my cry echoing through the house. At once the door burst open. Heathcliff stood there, wild, his face transformed with anguish. He rushed to the window, flung it wide, and cried into the night, "Cathy, come in. Do not torment me. You know I cannot live without you. Come back to me." His voice broke the storm itself. He stood there desperate, calling again and again into the darkness. as though the wind might return his lost love. I watched, shaken to the soul. At last he turned, his eyes burning with grief and fury, and I felt as though I had trespassed upon a wound too deep for healing. The next day I returned to Thrushcross Grange, restless and haunted. I turned to my housekeeper, Nellie Dean, and begged her to tell me the story of that strange household. Nellie Dean sighed, her eyes heavy with memory. She sat back in her chair, folded her hands, and with a deep sense of melancholy, began her tale, as though drawing back a curtain on old sorrows. It was 30 years ago, when old Mr. Earnshaw was master of Wuthering Heights, she said. One autumn evening, he returned from Liverpool after a long journey, and in his arms he carried a strange little boy. Dark, ragged, half-starved, with the look of a gypsy about him. Mr. Earnshaw said he had found him wandering in the streets, abandoned, and his heart could not bear to leave the child to perish. I have named this boy Heathcliff, he told us. I shall keep him as my own. And from that moment, the boy bore no other name. Mrs. Earnshaw, however, was not pleased. She looked at the child with hard eyes. "We have children enough of our own," she said sharply. "Why bring this ragged gypsy brat into our home? He is no Earnshaw." Her words never softened. From the start she disliked him, and nothing he did ever won her heart. But Mr. Earnshaw clung to his choice. He gave the boy food, clothes, and more kindness than even to his own son Hindley. That favoritism sowed bitterness, for Hindley could never forgive being displaced. Catherine, too, at first mocked Heathcliff, calling him names, but in time she was drawn to him. They quarreled, but they clung to one another like two wild creatures who understood each other's souls. The house grew full of strife. Hindley's temper flared against Heathcliff at every turn, and even Catherine joined the mischief when it suited her. Yet Heathcliff endured it all, silent and stubborn, clinging only to his bond with her. Mrs. Earnshaw's disapproval remained constant until the end of her days. She died after only 2 years of the boy's arrival, her health failing quickly, and some said bitterness hastened her decline. Her last looks were cold toward the orphan she had never accepted. As for Mr. Earnshaw, he aged fast beneath the burden of his household's quarrels. His strength waned. The storms of the heights wore him down. He favored Heathcliff openly, often scolding Hindley harshly for cruelty, and that poisoned the father-son bond forever. In his last days he grew weary and sorrowful. On his deathbed he blessed Catherine and Heathcliff together, calling them his joy, and left Hindley embittered. Soon after, he closed his eyes and was gone. When Mr. Earnshaw died, the house changed. Hindley, now master, returned from college with a young wife, Frances. His first act was to cast Heathcliff down from the place of a son to that of a servant. He forced him to labor in the fields, stripped him of education, and sought to grind him into the dust. But Heathcliff did not break. In silence he endured, his pride smoldering like coal beneath ashes. Catherine still clung to him. They stole moments together in the fields and on the moors, whispering of freedom, laughing at the world's scorn. He grew fierce and stubborn, clinging to Catherine as the only light in his harsh world. One evening, Catherine and Heathcliff wandered far across the moors, spying on the Linton family at Thrushcross Grange. The Grange was a different world, soft carpets, golden light, flowing manners. Catherine, bold as ever, pressed too close to the window. The Lintons' dog set upon her, and in the struggle she was bitten and injured. The Lintons took her in, tending to her wounds, and Catherine remained there for weeks. When she returned at last to Wuthering Heights, she had changed. She came back dressed in silk, her manners softened, her laughter quieter. She was still Catherine, spirited, fiery, but there was a new polish to her, a touch of the gentility of the Grange. Heathcliff stood before her in his rough clothes, his face blackened with labor, and she laughed at him, not with cruelty, but with a strange mix of embarrassment and shame. That laugh cut him deeper than any blow Hindley had ever given. Nellie's voice lowered, heavy with memory, and from that day Heathcliff began to feel the gulf between them. He worshipped her still, but he knew that the world she had tasted at the Grange would not welcome him. And Catherine herself, she was torn, for though her soul was Heathcliff's, her eyes had begun to look toward the life of comfort she had seen. Nellie paused, her face shadowed by the firelight. And that, she said softly, was the beginning of the tragedy. But sorrow was not yet finished with this house. Hindley, now master, seemed for a short while softened by his young wife Frances. Her laughter brought a little warmth back into the Heights, and for a time even his cruelty toward Heathcliff lessened. But happiness in this family never lasted. Soon after she gave birth to her son Hareton, Frances sickened and died. Hindley, shattered, turned to drink and cruelty. His violence filled the house with misery, and Heathcliff bore the brunt of his rages, his pride unbroken though his station sank lower each day. And in this dark season came the moment that sealed all fates. One evening, Catherine came to me, restless and pale. I had never seen her so unsettled. "Nellie," she said, "I see that Edgar Linton will be asking me to marry him. And if I were to accept, why should I not? He is handsome and pleasant, and he loves me. If I marry him, I shall be the greatest lady in the neighborhood." I looked at her sharply and said, "You are thinking more of Edgar's position and fortune than of your own heart, Miss Catherine. That is a selfish plan." At these words she flared, saying, "It is not selfish. If I become the mistress of the Grange, I mean to help Heathcliff too. Don't you see, Nellie? If I marry Edgar, I can use my place to raise Heathcliff out of his degradation." Then her voice dropped, and softly she said, "Oh, Nellie, if I marry Heathcliff, what would become of us? We should be beggars. Hindley has degraded him so badly he could never rise again. It would degrade me now to marry Heathcliff." My heart sank at her words, but before I could answer, she pressed on, her passion breaking loose. "You think me heartless. You think I do not love Heathcliff. But, Nellie," she said, "I love him more than myself. My love for Edgar is like the leaves in the woods. Time will change it, as winter changes the trees. But Nellie," she said, "my love for Heathcliff is eternal. Whatever souls are made of, his and mine are the same, and Edgar's and mine are as different as a moonbeam from lightning, or frost from fire." She stopped then, her whole being aflame, and in a voice that shook me she cried out, "I am Heathcliff. He's always, always in my mind. He is not just someone I love. He is me. He is the foundation of my entire being. So don't speak of our separation again. It is not possible." But during our conversation, what Catherine didn't know was that Heathcliff was standing just outside the door. He heard only those bitter words, that it would degrade her to marry him. Pride and agony struck him silent. Without a word, he fled into the night. Catherine searched for him, called his name across the storm, but he was gone. That night he vanished from Wuthering Heights. Days passed, and he did not return. Catherine's spirit faltered under the weight of his absence. Fever seized her. She raved in delirium, her body weakened by grief. Edgar Linton, alarmed and tender, came often to her side. In her weakness she accepted his comfort, and at last agreed to be his bride. But I knew that even as she gave her hand to Linton, her soul had gone out into the storm with Heathcliff, and it would never return. Nellie's voice grew low, her eyes lost in memory. Catherine did marry Edgar Linton. She became mistress of Thrushcross Grange. Edgar adored her, and for some time they lived in peace. Yet her spirit was restless. She loved Edgar in her way, but her soul still belonged to Heathcliff. It was 3 years later when Heathcliff returned. No one knew where he had gone, but he came back transformed, tall, strong, well-dressed, with the bearing of a gentleman. The fire of pride burned in him, and revenge sat cold in his eyes. Catherine, seeing him again, was struck to the heart. She ran to him, laughing and weeping, calling his name as though he had risen from the grave. Edgar Linton, watching, grew pale with dread, for he knew at once the bond between them had never died. From then the Grange knew no peace. Catherine's heart was torn between husband and Heathcliff, her wild love clashing with her duty. Heathcliff haunted Thrushcross Grange, and Edgar, though proud and gentle, despised him. Their quarrels filled the house with bitterness. It was then that Isabella, Edgar Linton's sister, fell blindly in love with Heathcliff. Against every warning, she fled with him and became his wife. But her passion brought her only misery. Heathcliff cared nothing for her. He used her as a weapon against Edgar, and her life with him was cruel and wretched. But while Isabella suffered in silence, another sorrow grew nearer at Thrushcross Grange. Catherine's health began to fail. Her spirit had always burned too fiercely for her fragile body. After her constant longing for Heathcliff, she withdrew from the world. She ate little, slept little, and spoke often of death, not with fear, but as if it were a way back to peace. I was with her through those dark weeks. Her strength faded day by day, and her mind drifted between feverish dreams and memories of the moors. Then, one stormy evening, Heathcliff came. Nothing could keep him out. He came like a spirit drawn by the call of another. When I opened the door to Catherine's room, she was already on her feet, trembling, her face white as moonlight. Heathcliff crossed the room and took her in his arms. For a long moment neither spoke. Catherine turned towards him, her breath shallow, her eyes burning like a dying flame. They only looked at one another, as though the years of pain, anger, and love had come flooding back. In silence. Then Catherine, her voice weak but burning, whispered, "Oh, Heathcliff, how could you leave me? Don't you see what you have done? You have killed me. Yes, you have killed me." Heathcliff trembled, every word cutting through him like fire. "Killed you?" he cried. "Please don't say so, Catherine." "I have not broken your heart," he cried. "You have broken it, and in breaking it, you have broken mine." Saying this, tears burned his eyes and rolled down his cheeks. She reached out, her hand cold against his cheek. "You left me to die," she breathed. "Don't you see? I am not at peace, Heathcliff. I shall never be at peace." Catherine swayed, tears filling her eyes. "I shall not rest till you are with me. You said I was your soul, your life, and you left me to die. Oh, Heathcliff, how cruel you are to love me so and yet destroy me." He caught her in his arms, his voice low, almost a growl through tears. "You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers. I believe, I know that ghosts have wandered the earth. Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you." She tried to smile, her eyes softening. "I will not leave you," she whispered faintly, "not in life, nor after." And with that breath her body went limp in his arms. Heathcliff cried her name, but her head had fallen back, her eyes half open, seeing something beyond him. I rushed forward. She had only fainted, but the life in her seemed to flicker like a dying flame. Hours later, the house stirred with cries, not of grief, but of birth. Before the night was done, Catherine had brought a daughter into the world. When dawn came, the physician told Edgar and Heathcliff the truth. Catherine Earnshaw was dead, and her child lived. Heathcliff stood silent for a long moment, his face pale, his eyes hollow. Then suddenly he fell on his knees and wailed, uttering the words, "Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then." Heathcliff rose and went to see her one last time. He held her, bowed his head, and whispered brokenly, "I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul." Edgar wept quietly, but Heathcliff was another thing entirely. He dashed out into the storm, calling her name again and again, his voice wild with agony. He begged the wind to carry her ghost back to him. And from that night on, he was never the same man. His love turned to torment, his heart to stone. He would never forgive the living, nor let the dead rest. From the night Catherine died, peace left Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff shut himself away from all comfort. Days turned to weeks, and weeks to years, but grief does not follow time. It sits in the soul and festers there. His first cruelty fell upon Hindley Earnshaw. In his despair, Hindley had gambled and drunk away his lands. Heathcliff watched him sink and did nothing to save him. When Hindley died, Heathcliff took the very roof over his head, leaving Hindley's boy Hareton, a servant in the house that should have been his. Then he turned his eyes to Edgar Linton, still mourning Catherine at Thrushcross Grange. Edgar's sister, Isabella, fled from the house not long after. She escaped with her unborn son, bruised and terrified, and no one ever saw her again in those hills. Her child, little Linton Heathcliff, was raised far away, a frail reflection of his father's fire. Heathcliff sent for him, determined to use the boy one day as a weapon in his vengeance. Years passed. The child Catherine left behind grew into a bright and gentle girl, a young Cathy. When Heathcliff looked at her, he saw both a wound and a miracle. She was the exact image of the woman he loved and lost, and yet she was beyond his reach, belonging to a world still living. He schemed to join the two branches of his hatred, Edgar Linton's daughter, young Catherine Linton, and his own frail son, Linton Heathcliff. The girl was sweet-tempered, wild at heart like her mother, yet innocent of all the wrongs done before her birth. But Heathcliff had no mercy. Through deceit, he lured her to the heights and forced her into a loveless marriage with his ailing son Linton. Linton, weak and consumed by sickness, died soon after the marriage, leaving Catherine a widow still trapped within those cold stone walls. Her father Edgar died soon after, his heart broken and his home stolen from him. And so Heathcliff stood alone, with his vengeance complete. Both houses, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, lay in his grasp. The young heiress of them both lived now beneath his roof and under his mercy. Nellie's voice grew quiet as she looked into the fire. "And that's how things are now, Mr. Lockwood," she said. "Miss Catherine lives here at Wuthering Heights, under Mr. Heathcliff's care, though it's more like a kind of prison than a home. He treats her kindly at times, but she's never truly free. He keeps her near, perhaps because she reminds him so much of her mother. Every time he looks at her, it's like he sees Catherine Earnshaw again." Her hands folded slowly in her lap. "But she isn't alone. Young Hareton Earnshaw lives here too, the master's own nephew. Heathcliff has raised him without educating him, or any comfort, just to see him suffer as his father once made him suffer. Yet he's grown into a good-hearted man, in spite of everything." Nellie smiled faintly. At first, Miss Catherine looked down on him. Proud as she is, she used to laugh at his rough speech and untidy ways. But over time, things changed. She began to teach him to read again, to help him speak better. They sit together now, most evenings by the fire, reading and talking softly. You can see it in their faces that they care for each other. And I think Mr. Heathcliff knows it too. He watches them sometimes, but says nothing. It's strange, sir. He doesn't seem angry anymore, only tired. The room was silent for a while, except for the sound of the wind outside. Then I thanked her and went back to my chambers, my mind full of the faces and voices I had never met but somehow felt I knew. Soon after, I fell ill for several weeks. When spring came, I decided to return south, leaving the Grange behind. Months passed before I came back again to the moors out of curiosity, but the air felt different now. It was calmer and softer. When he reached Wuthering Heights, the sky was pale and the hills were covered with heather. Nellie met me at the door, her face kind but changed by time. "You've come back, sir?" she asked with quiet surprise. "Yes," I said. "How are things here? And how is Mr. Heathcliff? Is he well?" She looked away for a moment before answering. "Mr. Heathcliff is gone." I stared at her. "Gone? Dead?" she said softly. "It happened not long ago." He had been strange for days, walking the moors alone, smiling to himself, talking to someone no one else could see. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He told me once that she's with me again. Catherine is everywhere. She is in the wind, in the walls, in my heart. I can't tell if I'm alive or dead anymore." Nellie paused, her voice trembling. Then one morning I found him in his room. The window was open, the rain had blown in. He was lying still, with a peaceful look on his face, as if he had only fallen asleep beside her. I said nothing for a long time. The house felt quieter than ever before. When I stepped outside, the wind was gentle over the moors. I walked to the small churchyard near the hill and found 3 graves side by side, which read Catherine Earnshaw, Edgar Linton, and Heathcliff. I stood by their graves a long while, watching the moorland fade into mist. The heather bent softly in the wind, and the sky, pale and endless, stretched over the lonely hills. It was hard to believe that so much pain, so much longing, had ended in such perfect stillness. Yet something in the air seemed alive, as if the moors still remembered their footsteps. Sometimes when the wind passed low and wild, it carried a sound, faint but clear. A laugh, a cry, a whisper, half joy and half sorrow. And then I knew they were there, not ghosts to fear, but spirits set free. Catherine and Heathcliff side by side again, running through the endless moors where no walls divide them, where no storm can tear them apart. They belong to the wind now, to the wild earth, to the eternal night that holds them both. And when the storm rises over Wuthering Heights, and the grass trembles beneath the sky's breath, it is said you can still see them, two shadows moving together across the heather, their laughter carried through the wind, their love burning quietly against the dark. At last, they were home.